Nos introduces, inicio yo y luego ya tú con el CV.
Okay. Bueno, pues buenas tardes a todos. Hoy tendremos el primer conversatorio del 2022 relacionado con la innovación en el Colegio de Postgraduados. Hoy tenemos el honor de tener al profesor Otte Hansen, y es una plática particularmente importante porque se acaba de aceptar en México la Ley de Economía Circular, que le da un papel importante a las cooperativas como operadores justamente de este sistema en México. A continuación, el doctor Juan Antonio Villanueva nos dará unas palabras y posteriormente les daré un resumen del CV del profesor.
Sí, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, doctora Alejandra Ramírez Martínez, que es quien estará conduciendo este conversatorio. Muchas gracias. Ella es uno de los nuevos talentos del Colegio de Postgraduados, quien tengo el gusto de conocer de manera personal porque es colaboradora del Colegio de Postgraduados en el campus Veracruz, de donde ustedes, como saben, provengo. Por otro lado, también quiero agradecer al profesor Henning Otte Hansen, quien es desde la Universidad de Copenhague, nos estará ayudando a entender estas dinámicas de la innovación y de alguna manera nos facilita, nos da otro punto de vista de cómo desde las universidades, desde las instituciones muy parecidas al Colegio de Postgraduados, se puede hacer, se debe empujar la innovación para que entonces el impacto institucional, los impactos de las propias instituciones como la nuestra, como la Universidad de Copenhague, lleguen mucho más allá de lo que tradicionalmente ha hecho el colegio hasta el día de hoy. Esa es la intención de este conversatorio, esta es la intención de el traer y el conversar y el reflexionar alrededor de la innovación. El invitarlos a cada vez más, se sumen más gente a esto que es la economía del conocimiento. La economía del conocimiento que nos permite que a partir de nuestra labor diaria, a partir de nuestra labor que pareciera que no pasa mayor cosa, ahora que sí suceda todo aquello que nosotros siempre hemos puesto como la justificante de nuestra actividad. Es decir, siempre hemos dicho como justificante de nuestra actividad que es importante lo que hacemos porque es importante para el país. Bueno, pues ahora es importante que hagamos que eso suceda en el país, que todo lo que estudiamos, que todo lo que empujamos pase a política pública, pase a una comunidad, se vuelva una realidad en términos de una asociatividad o se vuelva también una realidad como una patente, un modelo de utilidad o una situación en donde se pueda licenciar todo ese conocimiento y entonces el propio colegio pueda tener recursos adicionales para poder crecer. Esa es alguna de las formas en lo que estamos buscando que el impacto del colegio sea mucho, mucho mayor de lo que ya es hoy. Siempre estaremos buscando un paso adicional, ¿verdad?, para que el colegio crezca, sea mayor, más grande y más vigoroso de lo que lo conocemos hoy en día. Necesitamos ir teniendo nuevos retos cada vez. Y habiendo dicho esto, yo le quiero agradecer a la doctora Alejandra Ramírez Martínez, si por favor nos hace la presentación del doctor Otte Hansen, para que entonces ya podamos ver su presentación. Muchas gracias. Gracias, doctor.
Muchas gracias, doctor. Bueno, pues el profesor, su investigación se dirige particularmente a los mercados alimenticios, a la industria de los alimentos, a la economía dentro del área de los alimentos también y a los negocios de los alimentos a nivel internacional. También trabaja con clústeres alimenticios, de los cuales hablará durante la presentación, y especialmente con cooperativas y su rol en las cadenas de valor, así como cómo lograr una mayor competitividad a nivel internacional de estas. Hace aproximadamente 20 años el profesor estuvo empleado en compañías no públicas y en organizaciones también del área de los alimentos. Actualmente ha realizado más de 500 presentaciones a nivel internacional, y también ha participado en 10 universidades internacionales. Ha escrito muchos libros, ha escrito una gran cantidad de artículos, y no me resta más que dar espacio a su presentación. Es importante mencionar que para no estar traduciendo a la par, tenemos un video con la presentación, y al final del mismo haremos las preguntas que han enviado y algunas otras que tenemos para él. Por favor, si podemos proyectar el video de la presentación del doctor. Muchas gracias.
My name is Henning or Hansen. I'll talk to you about cooperatives, how we can use farmer cooperatives to improve the conditions for the farmers, and how to improve the sustainability in the agri-food business. Try to show our experience from Denmark, how we may be able to transfer our experience, our bad, our good experience to other countries, for example, Mexico. I have a small agenda for you. First, try to define what is a cooperative. Is it unique, and how do we describe or define a cooperative or a co-op? I'll try to connect cooperatives and sustainability. What is the connection? How can cooperatives improve sustainability? And what are the mechanisms? Then I'll talk about cooperatives in Denmark. Try to describe our history, our experience. Where did we fail? Where did we succeed? And can we in some way try to bring our experience to other countries? Why should we build cooperatives? What are the pros and cons? What's the advantage and what's the disadvantage having a cooperative? How can we transfer the experience from cooperatives to other countries? Is it possible? What are the benefits? Then I have finally a case. I try to show how we in Denmark had a farmer cooperative that really had a huge problem, a huge market problem. But they were able to solve the problem because they had the farmers as members, as owners. They would support the company, and they were able to find solutions, and they were able to succeed and end up with an even better company. But what is a cooperative? How do we define? Well, it's mostly a company. It's a business like any other companies. It's owned by the people, the farmers, who benefit from the company. They may sell products to the company, or they may buy inputs from the company. So it's a normal company where the owners are called members, and the members, they will have the profit and they will benefit from being members of the cooperative. There are some general principles defined by the ICA, the global organization behind cooperatives. Mostly every farmer can join a cooperative. It's an open membership, it's voluntary. You can never force a farmer to join a cooperative. The farmers, they will elect the board. It's a democratic company. The members, they take part in the company, they benefit. It is independent from the government. The government should not be able to be involved, to have influence in the cooperative. The cooperative, they also try to increase the education, try to increase the competence among the members, training and information, and also try to stimulate cooperation among cooperatives, try to stimulate them to work together, to have joint ventures, and to collaborate. And finally, also concern for the community. They may build local hospitals or try to improve the environment. That's also a goal for the cooperatives. And you will find cooperatives in many countries all over the world. Just a brief list of some examples here. Argentina, for example, you have many farmers in the farmer cooperatives. In Uruguay, for example, almost all milk production is sold to dairy cooperatives. In Poland, also a major share of the dairy industry is owned by cooperatives. Singapore, Vietnam, for example, also in Norway, indeed, in almost all industries, in the farm industry, dairy, seed, timber, eggs, fur markets, cooperatives have a major market shares. Also globally, you see a big market share. Other examples in the EU, for example, again, a major share of our production in Japan, in Kenya, in Africa, in coffee, in dairy, etc. In New Zealand, indeed, in the dairy industry, very big dairy cooperative, but also in farm supply. And in the US, you see even an increasing market share for dairy cooperatives. So all over the world, you see important cooperatives with increasing or big market shares. What is the connection between cooperatives and sustainability? Well, cooperatives, they will normally support and give more efficient value chains. From farm to fork, there'll be less middlemen and also less waste in this way. Very efficient value chains, no waste or reduced waste, more perfect markets, more competition, more balanced market power. So farmers, often the poor farmers, they will benefit. Access to the market, better price, security of demand. So it will improve the poor farmers indeed. So more efficient markets, and you will benefit the poor people, and normally also less waste and more efficient markets. Some examples here from Denmark, the Danish experience. Denmark is still a very small country in the EU, 5.5 million people, only less than 10,000 full-time farmers, but they are quite big, and we have a long tradition for having cooperatives, and they have still today quite big market shares. Here's some numbers for the market shares in Denmark. The market shares for cooperatives in the meat, in the pig, 85% of all pigs are slaughtered in meat cooperatives. Beef also. In dairy, indeed, extremely high market shares. More than 90% of all milk is processed by dairy cooperatives. You see also zero market shares for sugar, for poultry, machinery. Here they have failed. Sugar is now owned by foreign investors. Poultry also owned by foreign investors. Feed, fertilizer has increased the market share for a long period, really been able to compete. Eggs, grass seed, potato starch. So, well, it depends on, some have small, some have a high market share. It all depends on, well, mostly the management, but also do the farmers need a cooperative, or do they have enough competition? Do they have sufficient customers or suppliers? So it depends on what do the farmers need, and have they been able to have a good management that could develop the cooperative. Some examples here among the biggest companies in the world. Arla, for example. Arla Food is one of the biggest dairy companies in the world. Danish Crown is also a very big meat company. So we have some few big cooperatives. Example, the Danish Crown company. It is the world's biggest exporter of pig meat, owned by Danish pig farmers. You see one of their factories, a slaughterhouse. 10,000 pigs per week are slaughtered in this area. Huge company. Arla Food is also a Danish-based dairy cooperative, but now with members in 7 countries. They have merged with dairy cooperatives in other countries, in Sweden and Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the UK. So now they are among the biggest dairies in the world, but still owned by dairy farmers. We have quite a big food industry in a European level. We have among the biggest food industries in the EU. So around 17% of the total turnover in the industry is food industry. So very big, a very important industry in Denmark compared to the other countries in the EU. We have quite high market shares. It's a way to illustrate, can we compete on the world market? Are we competitive? I try to measure some of the world market shares, grass seed, where we have a very strong position on the world market. So more than 30% of all grass seed sold on the world market is from a Danish company, but also pork, processed pork, cheese, for example, bacon, ham, quite high world market shares, but also hides and skins and cheese and butter. That's where we have we are quite competitive. The companies also quite big companies. Danish Crown, as mentioned, agri-food companies with a star. They are cooperatives, so among the biggest companies in Europe, but also feed industry, grass seeds, potato starch. Well, the biggest company in Europe, you see, and brewery Carlsberg, etc. So all these companies with star, they are cooperatives, and well, 0.5% of all farmers in Europe comes from Denmark, but still we have among the biggest companies in Europe because the farmers, they have merged their companies. They've been able to establish extremely big companies, a very well developed structure. Then you may ask the farmer in Denmark, why did you in fact establish cooperatives? What were the drivers? Why did you succeed, and why? Well, it all started back in the 1880s, more or less. Here you see the market shares in Denmark for dairies and pork, pig industry. Back in the 1880s, they started, and the cooperatives, they grew quite fast. So within a few decades, well, they were dominant on the Danish market. But what was the driver? Why did they start to establish cooperatives? Well, we had, again here, a huge problem. Many farmers, they were grain farmers. They produced grain, but we had suddenly a huge import of cheap grain coming from the US, from Russia. You could bring grain with boats or train. So suddenly we had a huge import of cheap grain from other countries. So the crop farmers, they really suffered. But what to do? Well, they said, well, we have to adjust, and we can just leave the market open and just import more and more cheap grain, and then try to change from crop to livestock production. Use more cows, more cattle, more poultry. Then you can compete on these livestock products. They did so. They produced more cows, more milk, more pigs. But there were only very few private slaughterhouses, and they were very strong, had strong bargaining power. So they had to find alternatives because so many small farmers, they were very weak, had no market power. So they had to build up their own cooperatives to be able to compete. So they had a problem. They had to change from grain to livestock. Another problem, well, only few customers. They had to build their own cooperatives. So that's how they solved a problem. And that's why they changed from grain to livestock. Also in other industries, the market shares for cooperatives increased from a very early point. So feed and grain and fur trade, eggs, grass seed and beef. And they are still increasing to a very high level. The feed and grain industry, they have acquired other companies. The grass seed is also growing year by year. It's now big. So they were able to convince the farmers, yes, if you establish cooperatives from scratch, you can have an advantage, you can be competitive, and you can benefit the farmers. We also had a huge structural development in the same period. We established more and more cooperatives, but later on they started to merge. We would need bigger companies. The number would decrease. We would have to be more globalized, and we would produce more and more pigs. So next step was to increase the competitiveness, try to have more stronger, more competitive companies. So in this period, you had this different curves, the number of cooperatives in pig meat and in dairy. Well, in the beginning, the number increased, but then you had a certain level. Now you could start to merge. So all the dairy cooperatives, or the pig meat cooperatives, they started to merge, and now we are back to a very, very low level, low number, but with extremely big companies. And this merger wave started more or less in the 1960s. Here you see the number of companies. Well, in this period, the number decreased. They really had to merge, be bigger, be more competitive. So it was a general development, merger, acquisitions to be stronger. So also having more and more concentration in this period. They try to measure what is the market share of the 4 biggest and the biggest company in the Danish meat industry. They are now all cooperatives, but you see in this area, they really merged and they grew bigger and bigger. And now the biggest company has around 80% of the market share, and the top 4 has almost 100%. So very strong development in these decades towards concentration and consolidation. Also among the farmers, you had the same structural development. The farms grew bigger and bigger. Example here, the number of pigs per farm also increased. The farmers could utilize economies of scale. If you have a bigger farm, you would have lower cost per kilo of pig. You would hire people, but they would contribute to the better economy. So year by year, you're seeing a huge increase in the average size. Now it's up to 4,000 pigs per farm in average. Also more efficient sows. The number of piglets per sow per year has been increasing from around 12 to now around 35 piglets per sow per year. Trying to select the best sows that produced more piglets. It's also a way to be more efficient. So in this period, the last 40 years, there's been no price increase for the pig farmers. They've been able to produce at the same price in nominal prices for these 40 years because they became more and more efficient. And again, it was driven by their cooperatives. They would give farmers advice. They are involved in genetics, in research and development, so trying to give farmers more efficient input to be able to produce with lower cost. Farmers, they often ask me, yes, but can we see the benefits? Do we really benefit? And I have tried to calculate, well, what is the benefit? What is the economic benefit for the farmers in Denmark? And every year, the farmers, they share the profit from the cooperatives. When you have your annual report, well, say, well, we have this profit, and most of it goes back to the farmers. So in average, 35% of the farmers' income, that is directly coming from the profit of the cooperative. When you share the annual profit, it goes back. So it's a major share of the farmer's income that is directly coming from the cooperative. And of course, they also have other benefits. Security of demand. You know, you have the right to deliver all your milk. So you should not worry who will buy my milk today. There's always a customer. There's always a cooperative that must take all my milk. You should not worry. You can focus on being a good farmer and leave all the marketing, all the sales to your cooperative. So we have a very strong value chain. What is the value chain? Well, it's the way from farm to fork. All these links, the input, which may be genetics, research, development, feed, medicine, capital, fertilizer, you name it, seed. Then the farmers, the next step in the value chain, and the farmers, they are in fact the driver. They are mostly the people who establish cooperatives, backwards or forward. We call it about upstream and downstream. Upstream, that's to the input. Downstream, that's towards the retail. The farmers, they may move forward, go into processing or wholesale, and go even to the retail to be able to control the entire value chain and to have access to all the profit that will be produced in the value chain. And they will they'll be able to pick any kind of market information. Well, what does the consumer demand tomorrow? They will know exactly how the market is developing, and they can be able to bring this knowledge back to the farmers or back to the input, and then they can react very quickly to the new market change. Then you may ask, well, who is the strongest link today? Farmers, they are many small individual farmers, and they face perhaps very few big customers. So today we have this picture that we have very, very strong retail industry, and the farmers, they are quite weak, measured by their size. Many small farmers compared to the retailers. So now the strong links today, well, that's Tesco or Walmart or Carrefour. The retailers, they are extremely strong. They're growing faster and faster, being more and more global. So the size, I try just to measure, for example, the Danish big companies on the top. You have Danish Crown, you have Arla, extremely big companies. But compared to their customer, the global retail industry, they're extremely small compared to Walmart at the bottom or Carrefour. Still, they face very strong, powerful retailers with a very strong bargaining power. So again, you still have to be able to work together to just trying to match your customers in size. That's a very important goal or task for the cooperatives. Try to work together to be able to match your supplier or your customer in size to have a more balanced market. Then I'm often asked, well, what makes Danish food industry competitive? Why can we compete? Why do we have these strong or big market shares? They may ask, well, is it because of you, a scientist? I say no, not at all. And I try to find out what are the competitive strengths in the Danish pig or food industry. Here, an example, the pig industry. You may ask, well, do we have a low labor cost? Are we able to compete on low wages? I guess no. In average, it's around $30 per hour. That's the average salary for a Danish worker employed in the pig industry. It's a very high cost. You may ask, do we have young, dynamic farmers? No. They're almost as old as me. They are 59 years old in average. So we still have a very quite old farmers. They may not be the most dynamic farmers. So that's not why we can compete. You may ask, well, do we have any tax incentives? Do we really attract people to be farmers? Now, I think we have among the highest tax level in OECD. 46% of the GDP, that is a tax. So there's absolutely no tax incentive for people to work harder to start to be farmers. Then you may ask, well, do we have very weak environmental rules? I guess also here the answer is no. If you ask the farmers, they say, well, no, we have taxes, we have regulations every day, so it may not be the most important strengths. So these are indeed four non-competitive strengths. But then we can say, well, it may be because of the vertical integration that we can connect all the links in the value chain. When we ask foreign experts, well, you're able to connect from farm to fork, from farmer to consumer. You can connect. You're able to reduce the number of middlemen. You can easily transport products from the field to the fork, and you can easily learn from the market. Very efficient value chains. Food safety is also one of our strengths, and again, it's also due to the cooperatives. And we can collaborate. The authorities, the government, the people, they both control, they also advise farmers. They go and control any kind of farm or food industry, but they also try to teach the people or the farmers how can you improve? How can you improve, for example, the pig meat quality? I guess that's also very important. Not only police, but also trying to help them. Another strength is the structural development. Economies of scale, extremely big companies. And when you want to sell pork to China or to Japan, for example, you have to have some kind of strength, some kind of security of supply. So when you have a big company, you can always tell a customer in Japan, yes, sure, we can deliver bacon or pork every day, all year round for the next 5 to 10 years, because we know that we are owned by our suppliers, by our farmers, and we can be sure that we can fulfill our contracts. We can produce pig meat for the Japanese market every day, and no problem. So the size does matter indeed. We have what we call a strong food cluster. The cluster is some kind of value chain, but it's also including the authorities and any other direct stakeholder. For example, my faculty, or advisory service, or labor unions, or business unions, all stakeholders, they are closely connected and they collaborate. That's also a benefit. I guess we have the ability to bring research and development from the laboratory to the farm very, very quickly. We have a farmer-owned organization with 500 people, and their aim is to pick relevant science to bring it to the farmers, to the pig business, to the pig farmers. So try to bring research to be applied in a very efficient way. That's also the farmer-driven advisory service. It's also a cooperative organization that the farmers, they can every day have access to independent expert advisory service. If the farmer has a problem, how to buy fertilizer, how to run my farm, they can always have access to independent advisory service. And their only aim is to benefit the farmers, not to sell fertilizer, to sell pesticides. That's also, I guess, a very important issue. Self-ownership and independent farmers. Yes, farmers, they collaborate, they make cooperatives in processing and in supplying the farmers. But when they are a farmer, they are independent and they have self-ownership. The farmers, mostly they have ownership at their own farm. It's some kind of a huge incentive to work hard. You can decide yourself what to do, and if you perform well, then you have a huge profit. So this incentive, being a self-ownership farmer, that is also, I guess, an important issue. And finally, what I would call social capital, or trust, or this win-win approach, that farmers, they are colleagues, and they should not compete. When you establish a dairy cooperative, the members, the owners, they are farmers. They may be your neighbor. And when you are in this company, well, you work together, you have the same goal, then you are colleagues and not competitors. when you elect the board, well, you give the board a mandate to run the company, and you should trust them. Corruption, it does not exist at all, I would say. And you are always controlled, you're monitored by auditors. So you can be quite sure that when you have this cooperative, it is fair, no corruption, and all the profit goes back to the members. Because that's also a quite important issue. Farmers, they often meet and they show each other the field, their cattle, their cows, their pigs, and they may also exchange animal. So this mindset of being mostly colleagues, I guess that's also quite important. We've asked some foreign experts, say, well, for the industry, the pig industry, why can we compete very high cost environmental rules? And they say here, this Canadian professor said, well, it's the way the industry is organized, that you have very efficient value chains, no middlemen, easily bring market information back to the farmers. That's why we can succeed. That was her conclusion. This Girard, this Swiss company, again, the farmers' ownership is the reason, that is the answer to why we can compete. It's not the scientists or the government. It's more that the farmers themselves, they can establish cooperatives. I asked this Italian professor, said, well, yes, we know, or we are a bit impressed, but we can't copy you here in Italy, he said, because farmers in Italy do not trust each other or trust the community. So this lack of trust is a crucial parameter. So even in Italy, they cannot establish a cooperative like in Denmark, because this trust is so crucial. Another expert saying, well, sorry, it's Danish, never mind, yeah. So the drivers behind this collaboration, when you ask the farmers, why do you still support, establish, maintain cooperatives? What is the direct driver? Well, first of all, access to the markets. We are farmers. We know how to grow crops, how to take care of our cattle, how to have pigs or chicken. We want to be an expert as a farmer, but access to the market, to contact the customers, well, we have no time for that. We would leave that to other, and they would secure us that we can always have access to the market. So they will help us to sell our products. That's one major problem they can solve. And if you go to other countries, you can see, well, how to go from producing for your own family to producing for a market. That's a very huge step to move. And here the cooperatives, they can help you. Access to the added value downstream. If you produce unique cattle, unique milk, unique pigs, and you will have an extra price for that downstream, you will know that this profit goes back to me. The added value in the processing, in the wholesale, goes back to me as a farmer, because it's a cooperative model, and all the profit goes back to me. So I can just relax and say, well, nobody will treat us badly, because nobody can trick us. We will have access to the downstream added value. Often you will have very strong private companies. They could dictate you. If you are a farmer selling milk and you have only one customer, privately owned, well, they can almost dictate you, because you have milk every day, fresh milk. You cannot start to argue or to bargain every day what is the price today. So you will be independent of these strong private companies. You have an alternative. You have your own dairy cooperative. There's always a customer, always a demand, always security of supply. You have the right to bring your milk to your dairy cooperative every day. No discussion. That's also a huge security of your daily business. Less middlemen. I was told as a case in Africa, there may be up to 5 middlemen from the farmer to the consumer. If you produce milk, well then there will be salesmen or other middlemen. They will all have a piece of your cake. They should also have some kind of profit, and they'll be extremely efficient. It's very difficult to trace back the milk. If you had bad milk in your retail store, how can you trace back the milk if there are up to 5 different middlemen? So that's also a problem. And if you have dairy cooperative, well, there will be less middlemen. Also a huge benefit. This vertical integration, well, you can easily find out what does the market demand. You access to the market being a farmer. If you are told, well, now there is a new demand for organic milk, for example, you know, because your company is close to the market, so they can easily next day go to your member, the farmer, the owner, say, well, we can see now there's a new demand. You should try to produce organic milk, and we can be sure there's a market, and we can sell the milk for you. There's also a benefit from having a cooperative. So farmers, they can focus on being a strong, competent, competitive farmer, and just leave all the marketing, all the sale, all the processing for the cooperative. They should not worry. That's also a way to stabilize the farmers. They should not worry. It's not a problem. I will leave all the marketing for the dairy cooperative. That's why Danish farmers, they have established, and they still establish cooperatives, because they know they will benefit, access to the market, have a share of their profit, very few or no middlemen, so it's very efficient, and they will have access to the market. They know exactly what does the market demand, and then they'll be sure that we can sell it to the market the next day. But you have still also an advantage and also disadvantages being a cooperative. Here are some of the disadvantages, some of the advantages. As I mentioned, very strong integration, very low transaction cost, no middleman. It's directly from the farm to the cooperative to the consumer. Security of demand as always a customer. Quite small demand for capital. It's also an advantage. The banks, they will often trust a cooperative. They would not demand a high buffer, a large capital in the cooperative. Almost never cooperatives go bankrupt. They are quite robust, because if you have a dairy cooperative and they may suddenly suffer, suddenly their customer or their export country will close down, but then they will day 2 just adjust the price of the milk to the members. So the dairy cooperative can always adjust the price they pay the members, the farmers, if they have problems on their market. So you almost never see cooperatives suffering. They will bring the risk back to the farmers. So the banks, they are really willing to give cooperatives a loan without demanding a high level of equity or capital. That's also a huge advantage. And finally, the cooperatives, they give a more fair market power in the value chain, because you have many small individual farmers with almost no bargaining power. They're extremely small, extremely vulnerable compared to their customers or to their suppliers. But if you are in a cooperative, you are much stronger. You will negotiate together when you buy or when you sell. You will negotiate together and have much more marketing power. The disadvantages, yes, to attract equity. If you are a cooperative, you want to expand, to grow, to invest abroad, how can you finance this expansion? There's no stock market, there are no investors. You can only ask the members, the farmers, the owners, will you leave more money in the cooperative? there are no other sources of capital. So access to capital is a major disadvantage. You cannot control your supply, your volume. So if you're dairy cooperative, suddenly a market disappear, but still the farmers, they will continue to produce milk, and you must take all the milk. You cannot just ask the farmers not to bring the milk. The farmers, they have the right. So it's the problem of the dairy cooperative to find new markets. They should still accept or receive the milk every day. Often there is a conflict of interest. Farmers may have a dual role. They are both suppliers and also owners. Sometimes it may give a conflict. If you are a dairy farmer and the cooperative, they could, for example, invest in a foreign country, build up a foreign dairy, then they can use milk from foreign farmers. That would give them a huge profit. But if you are a huge farmer in your own country, why should you then invest in a foreign country? Would that benefit the price of your milk that you will produce? So they will say, no, we should focus on just processing my milk. But if you are an investor or a farmer without any production, well, you say, well, yes, we can produce abroad. It will give me a profit, and I would benefit. So, being an owner and a supplier may give some kind of problems or dilemmas. The board members, you can only elect farmers on the board. And do farmers really have the competence to be board members of such big or bigger and bigger companies? Denmark, well, it's $10 billion in turnover each year, and the board members, they are farmers. Of course, they will have the daily management, but farmers, can they really run such big companies? Do they have the skill? It may also be a problem. Often the supply is tied to the members' production. You can only have milk from your members. You cannot have milk from other farmers. It may also be a problem if you could sell more and more cheese, but your farmers would not produce more milk. You can have cheap milk from other farmers, but often you would not be allowed to have supply from non-members. And finally, often cooperatives would not move that far downstream. Often they would just be very close to the farmers in the value chain. They would just process the farmer's milk. They would not move very much downstream, or the members would not allow them to be very consumer oriented. They should focus on just in a visible way to process the milk, but go into ice cream industry or something more fancy, dairy based, or well, farmers would ask them, well, please stay close to us in the value chain and not be too fancy, too far away from our milk production. So there is also here a disadvantage. So both pros and cons. And one of the most important, well, yes, here, this very strong vertical integration. We had a case some years ago. Suddenly there was feedstuff from Belgium, which was not good. It was infected, but we could within a few days find out this feedstuff. Did we buy anything from Belgium? Which farmers had this feedstuff? We could really trace back and see, well, have we produced any eggs, any pigs that had been eating this feedstuff? So very strong traceability is also a benefit. We can really have this vertical integration. Security of demand. Farmers, they always have a customer. Access to equity is a major problem. In Denmark, they want to expand, but who should finance it? And of course, this why should you have this long-term investment? If you are a farmer, old farmer, 65 years old, why should you then invest in a cooperative that may give a payback in 5 years, for example? Why should you leave money in the cooperative for a long-term payback if you will leave the business within a few years? So this long-term investment, they often have a quite short horizon. That's also a problem.
Bueno, ahora después de la presentación vamos a dar paso a algunas preguntas. Algunas ya nos fueron enviados cuando se inscribieron y algunas otras que tengan, escríbelas en el chat, por favor, para hacérselas al profesor en el tiempo que tenemos de presentación. So, Henning, now we'll begin with the questions. Your presentation was very, very interesting. So we'll answer first the questions that was already sent by the people that we have now, and after that they also can tape some of them. So after these questions, if they are different, we are also try to answer it through you, of course. So the first I will say to you in English and then in Spanish, and I'll try to translate. Sorry if I interrupt you. The first, they're asking about the relationship between sustainability and the circular economy, and the keys to implement a sustainable system. So, la primera pregunta es cuál es la relación entre la sustentabilidad y la economía circular y cuáles serían las claves para implementar un sistema sustentable.
Yes, we have some examples in Denmark. If you take our big dairy, Arla-Food, they have made some kind of contract with the farmers. It's called Arla Field. It's a big manual. It's 60 pages long. So all the farmers, they must meet the standard in this contract. They are controlled the quality of the feed, what is the CO2 emission, what is the emission of the methane, etc. And if they meet these standards, they will have an extra price, a price premium. So I guess the market, the price is a very good instrument to make farmers more sustainable, but having very clear rules, it's very transparent, it's a long manual, and you can all see what should I do, and if I do what they told me, then I will have a benefit. So I guess the market, the price premium is a very important instrument.
Comenta este profesor Henning que ellos tienen un ejemplo, particularmente con la empresa Arla-Food, en el cual ellos tienen un contrato muy largo de aproximadamente 60 páginas. Es un manual en el cual se comparten los estándares que deben de cumplir en la producción de lácteos en este caso, así que controlan su calidad y, por ejemplo, también la emisión de CO2, de metano, y si ellos cumplen con estos estándares de sustentabilidad, entonces se les da un precio más alto por este producto. Entonces, el hecho de tener estas reglas claras es lo que incentiva tener una producción más sustentable en este caso.
If I may add, the rules, they are defined by the farmers themselves. So the members, the farmers, they set the rules, and they will in fact punish themselves. If they fail to meet the standards, well, there will be a penalty, and they may even be excluded from the cooperative. But when it's farmers that decide, here are the rules, it's a much better incentive and not some kind of authority or governmental rule.
Este profesor añade que justamente son los propios productores los que ponen las reglas, así que esto es, ellos mismos se penalizan, es un tipo de autopenalización. para no sentir justamente que es una autoridad externa, son los propios productores quienes fijan esas reglas.
Also in the egg industry and the pork, we have the same standards, the same manual. The farmers themselves, they make these rules, and well, you have a price premium or you may have a penalty. But they know that it will benefit all of us if we have higher standards, access to more markets, you will have a higher price, will be more sustainable.
También esto sucede en la industria del huevo y del puerco. Ellos también tienen este manual en donde se habla de estos estándares altos y al mismo tiempo ellos están convencidos que tener estos estándares les abre las puertas a otros mercados. So, Henning, in this sense, is the same farmer that thinks in CO2 and methane, they also are thinking that this is important?
Yes, they have made quite strict strategies. The dairies, the pork, saying that before 2030, we must reduce our CO2 emission by 30%. They've also made long-term plans into 2050. They should be CO2 neutral. So both the companies and the organizations have made quite strict rules or plans or standards how to be CO2 neutral. And they will be measured year by year. There are milestones. So they should be able to follow this trend. Yeah.
Y sí, efectivamente son los productores que están muy interesados en la emisión de menores cantidades de CO2, siguen las normas que se pide para la emisión para el año 2030 y 50, así que tienen reglas muy estrictas, se les mide cada año de hecho y buscan justamente con los años tener inclusive emisiones que sean neutrales.
And you may ask, what is the intention behind these strategies? I guess there are two kinds of drivers. First, they know if they do nothing, then the government will force them to change. And secondly, they hope that consumers may be able to or willing to pay a higher price for our more climate-friendly products. So it's both a market and a governmental driver.
Y nos podemos preguntar qué es lo que incentiva este comportamiento y es de hecho dos cosas. La primera es que los productores saben que si no hacen algo, el gobierno en un momento dado se los pedirá. Y por otro lado, que el consumidor está dispuesto a pagar por un alimento que ha sido producido de manera sustentable. Así que es un doble propósito, cumplir con las normas que en algún momento el gobierno les puede imponer, pero al mismo tiempo de mercado.
I think that for them, they have perhaps three directions. First of all, we have a tax, for example, on the CO2 emission. We may have support, and we may have technology. I guess that they really try to look at the technology. Can we produce, or can we have cows that produce less CO2? Can we have new technologies? Can we have a carbon capture in the field? So they try to find new technologies that can perhaps solve a part of the climate change problems. But a mixture of tax and support and technology.
También hay otras tres direcciones importantes. Uno es que hay un impuesto también a la producción de CO2, hay apoyo para esto y la tecnología. Los productores están buscando constantemente tecnologías en las cuales las vacas, por ejemplo, generen menos CO2 y metano. Así que también estos factores son muy importantes. Los impuestos, los apoyos y la tecnología disponible. So, for you, how do you define innovation? It's only technology, or is also to have a new product? ¿Cómo consideras la innovación? ¿Es solo tecnología o generar un nuevo producto?
I think we have three kinds of innovation. It's innovation of new products, innovation of new processes, and innovation of new organization. And I mostly talked about organization. How can we have smarter, more efficient organizations by having cooperatives? But you can also have more efficient process technologies, or you can have new products. So I guess there's 3 dimensions of innovation.
En este sentido hay 3 dimensiones de la innovación. La primera es en productos, en procesos y en organización, y el profesor se está enfocando en la innovación en la organización, es decir, en tener organizaciones más eficientes como son las cooperativas, pero claro, también existe las otras 2 mencionadas en donde la tecnología está implicada. Let me see another question that I have here. What do you think? So you have told us that in Denmark you have to pay taxes for the CO2 in emissions. And have you seen this in other countries? Do you think that this happens in other countries? Estos impulsos hacia generar o producir de manera sustentable, ¿los ha visto el profesor en otros países?
Yes, we see several examples of having taxes on CO2 emission. And they say, well, all industries, also the farm industry, should have the same tax. It's a very high debate in Denmark. Why should you have a tax on the farmers? Because the cows, they produce methane. You cannot just punish or tell the cow not to produce methane. So perhaps you should have taxes where you can adjust, but really have some kind of incentive or ability to change. But if you are a farmer, cows, you can hardly adjust. You can only reduce the number of cows. That's what we are discussing today. Which industry can easily adjust and reduce the emission, and how to have different tax levels depending on each sector.
De hecho, los impuestos al CO2, por ejemplo, también se observan, ha sido uno de los grandes incentivos para la producción de sustentable, y nos habla el profesor de que este es un debate actualmente en Dinamarca, porque no puedes, una vaca va a emitir de manera natural metano, por ejemplo. Entonces, para reducir la emisión de gases en este sentido, pues una de las opciones es reducir el número de vacas. Entonces, pero se está considerando que si no hay un impuesto, también haya un apoyo justamente para que haya una producción con un menor número de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en este caso.
But tax is a very strong instrument. It's very easy to implement. It is fair because all people should pay a tax, and then they will give the revenue back to the people. So try to tax the emission, but give the money back. It will also stimulate innovation. Can we find smarter ways to avoid this tax? So it's an easy way. All people will have to pay the tax, and you will have the money back, and you have a strong incentive to find new ways to avoid the tax.
Entonces sí, estos impuestos en la producción de gases de efecto invernadero se han convertido en un motor importante para buscar innovaciones, para justamente evitar este impuesto. Se considera justo porque lo pagan todos y finalmente es algo que regresa a la gente. Entonces, en resumen, el tener estos impuestos se ha vuelto una razón importante para generar innovación en este sector. Do you think that it is very, do you need a lot of money to have a system that would be sustainable? It is expensive or it can be cheap? ¿Un sistema sustentable es caro o no?
It is very expensive, and we really need capital. So the question is, how can we make this transformation, this change, how to finance? Because, well, you can invest in a new farm, but you will not be able to have a higher price on your products from day one. So in this transition period, how to finance this change? Will consumers pay an extra price? And perhaps we have what we call, or just move the production to other countries. That's what the farmers fear. Yes, could have a high tax in Denmark, but then farmers, they will move to other countries where perhaps they will produce even more CO2 per cow. So this outsourcing is also a huge problem. But capital, how to finance, and who should pay? The taxpayers, consumers, the farmers, and do we just have, or perhaps that we will just move the production to other countries? So it's very huge problem.
De hecho, es caro, se requiere un capital para realizar esta adaptación a sistemas más sustentables. Y particularmente porque, por ejemplo, si se instala una nueva granja, los costos de los productos no se elevarán rápidamente. Entonces, ¿qué hacer? Y bueno, uno de los temores es que los productores vayan a países justamente donde los costos sean más bajos. En resumen, efectivamente, realizar a veces estos cambios puede llegar a ser caro y un reto siempre será encontrar el capital para realizarlo.
We see now new investors, the pension funds, they now looking for new assets, and they say, well, if you have some big farms, we may be willing to acquire these farms. Then we can tell our members, our customers, yes, we are also investing in farms that should be more sustainable. So now we have tried to open up to allow new investors from all over the world. And now we see Chinese investors in Denmark, we see from Germany, and they say, well, let us just buy some few big farms, let us make them organic or perhaps more sustainable and be a part of our assets. So yes, we see now new investors that could perhaps finance a part of this change.
Algo que han hecho en Dinamarca es justamente abrir la posibilidad de inversión a otras personas. Han visto, por ejemplo, interés de personas en China y bueno, y también un interés de invertir en los fondos de pensión. Entonces, justamente como es caro, una de las opciones que han buscado es abrir la oportunidad o dar la oportunidad para que personas de otras partes del mundo inclusive inviertan en estos sistemas. Henning, there's this person that is very interesting about the trust. So to build these systems, you need trust. And so I want to ask you for another type of trust that can be made through women, for example, to only have women in a cooperative, or for example, people from the same ethnic group, for example. What do you think about this? Como la confianza es un factor muy importante en las cooperativas, le preguntamos al profesor qué piensa acerca de las cooperativas que están creadas solamente por mujeres o personas que sean del mismo grupo étnico, por ejemplo, como indígenas.
I will publish a paper in 2 days where I discuss women in the as being board members in the cooperatives. We have very, very few women or female board members in our farmer cooperatives. It is increasing from now 3% to up to 10%, but only 10% of the board members, they are women. And I say, well, we need the female touch, the female understanding. You see perhaps some kind of management problems or HR problems. I guess that often female, they have a better understanding and perhaps often more direct when they want to solve problems. So having 90% men in the boards is really a huge disadvantage. So I try to encourage them, make rules, make quotas, so we can have more women. Perhaps sometimes women, they are a bit shy, or say, well, it's a job for the men. But try to yes, encourage them and to try to join the boards. So it will really strengthen. We see more and more Dutch farmers in Denmark, and they are quite active, and they can easily join the boards. But female women, we still need more women.
De hecho, nos comenta el profesor que va a publicar un artículo en 2 días en el cual justamente busca incentivar la participación femenina en los altos mandos, digamos, en las mesas directivas de las cooperativas. Actualmente es muy poco, alrededor del 3%, entonces ha aumentado en los últimos años de 3 al 10, pero aún es bajo. Entonces, este toque femenino, el entendimiento de las mujeres puede justamente ayudar a las cooperativas.
We have had 2 Me Too cases in Denmark in the cooperative, and there were, I guess, 9 male in the board, no women. And I claim if there had been some female in the board, they would have discovered this problem much earlier and would have tried to solve this problem much earlier. But having only men, they were much more late to react to this problem.
De hecho, el profesor habla de un caso específico en el que la mesa directiva estaba formada solamente por 9 hombres, y comentaba que si hubieran existido mujeres, este problema se hubiera encontrado mucho más rápido. Así que la participación de las mujeres también está intentando ser incentivada en Dinamarca, y particularmente el profesor ha estado trabajando en ello. So Henning, can you talk us about the relationship between cooperatives and the circular economy? La relación entre las cooperativas y la economía circular.
Honestly, I think that cooperatives are not first mover in this area. They know that if we should change very dramatically, it will really be need investments. So if you are a dairy, you are a meat company, and you should be more sustainable, well, then you should change your business model very much. So I guess often they are a bit late, but I guess now they really see that there's no way back. We have to change, and making these contracts with the farmers. It's one way to be more circular. Agri-food, it is one of the biggest dairies in the world. Within a few years, they will be completely climate neutral. They will invest in windmill parks, so all the energy will come from these windmills. So the dairy themselves will be very climate neutral within a few years. And they know, well, if we are going to sell milk, then we can brand ourselves being a very sustainable dairy. So it's a mixture of branding, of profit, but also some kind of push from the farmers and from the society.
En este caso, nuevamente, tiene que ver con lo que ya hablábamos anteriormente, es decir, hay una posición de marca que impulsa la sustentabilidad. Particularmente, por ejemplo, en el caso de Agri-food, están ellos invirtiendo para ya no generar emisiones en unos años. Van a invertir en un parque muy grande de molinos de viento. Entonces, ya que los cambios son caros, estos beneficios, el generar a una marca, el que se relacione a una marca que venga también de los granjeros, de los productores, como ya lo comentábamos, es muy importante.
We have a quite high organic market share in Denmark. So the milk is around 25% of all milk in Denmark. They are organic. In eggs, it is even higher. So this organic wave has been driven mostly by business. They could see, well, there is a market. Consumers, they are willing to pay a higher price for organic food. So we just change and have more organic farms. So it's mostly a normal business. And you see very big farms. In fact, an average crop farm that is organic is bigger than a conventional farms. So we see very big business. So being organic farms is just a normal niche like any other businesses.
Por ejemplo, en el caso de la producción orgánica, en Dinamarca el 75% de la leche que se produce es orgánica, y en el caso de los huevos es aún más alta. Entonces esto es un negocio, ya que los consumidores están dispuestos a pagar precios más altos, y bueno, ese es un nicho finalmente, como es otros nichos en el caso de los productos alimenticios, pero esto impulsa la producción sustentable.
Our meat company, Danish Crown, is the biggest organic meat exporter in the world. But now they also announced we want to sell plant-based products without meat. So they're owned by pig farmers, by beef farmers, but now they also produce product without meat. It's also, well, a new direction because they have to follow the market. And the members, well, they're not very happy, but they can see, well, yes, we must follow the market, but they will not sell more cattle or more pig because now it's completely meat-free, these products. But they have to meet the market, so they will also supply the customers with plant-based products.
El profesor nos habla ahora del caso de Danish Crown, que nos habla, es una gran empresa que produce carne, y bueno, tienen un mercado muy grande de carne orgánica, pero actualmente están interesados en producir productos a base de plantas, es decir, sin carne. Nos comenta el profesor que hay algunos productores que no están muy contentos, sin embargo, esto obedece a la demanda del mercado. Así que, bueno, están dispuestos a generar este cambio porque están conscientes que es una demanda del mercado. Now we have some questions from research and cooperative. How research has helped to cooperative in Denmark? Can you give a particular example? ¿Cómo la investigación ha ayudado a las cooperativas en Dinamarca? ¿Nos puede el profesor dar algunos ejemplos específicos?
Good question. And what is if a company wants to go on the stock market, being a cooperative, then they may ask us, well, how can we make our, how can we tell investors that it would be a good investment? Then they come to us, say, well, can you help us to make some kind of brochure or announcements or report describing our company? Because people that should invest in our company would not know what is a cooperative. But if you, as a scientist, you can perhaps make a more official report with trust, and you can say, well, this company is a good business, so you can easily invest. So that is one way that they can come and ask us, please help us try to make our company transparent and visible, and how to tell people what is really a cooperative. Because often people say, well, it's some kind of old-fashioned way. Companies owned by farmers, we would not like to invest in such company. But if you have a scientist honestly telling what is the company, perhaps then the investors may more trust the words.
Una de las maneras en que la investigación, por ejemplo, ha apoyado a las cooperativas es cuando los miembros de una cooperativa quieren entrar, por ejemplo, a un mercado de valores, le piden a los investigadores que escriban reportes, por ejemplo, para poder explicar, decir a los inversionistas, convencerlos de que es un buen negocio. Entonces les piden, como les comentaba específicamente, que hagan algún reporte, por ejemplo, donde inclusive expliquen qué es una cooperativa para que quede más claro. Entonces, un ejemplo específico en el que se puede apoyar a las cooperativas es a través de la generación de documentos científicos que permitan a los miembros de la cooperativa mostrar a los inversionistas que es un buen negocio.
But mostly we help the cooperatives day by day, making speeches for the members, trying to give them ideas for their strategy. If they have customers, they may invite us, please, not you are scientists, please talk to our customers and try to discuss what is the market outlook. So that's how we day by day have this kind of collaboration, and we just discuss and exchange ideas. And I may make some kind of presentations. Well, what does the future look like? So that's how we can work with, or perhaps also benefit the cooperatives.
Otra cosa que ellos hacen es hablar con los clientes, digamos, esta es la otra forma de ayudarles en una base más común, más diaria. Los invitan a los investigadores, hablan con sus clientes, intercambian ideas. Entonces también esta es otra forma en que apoyan ellos al desarrollo de las cooperativas.
And one more example, Food, the Danish dairy, they want to make a dairy cluster in Nigeria, in Africa. They want to have a village with up to 1,000 dairy farmers in Nigeria, and they would help them build their own dairy, help them with advisory service, with input, with feed. Then the farmers be some kind of members of this ALA in Nigeria. So trying to copy the Danish model. And then they ask me, please come to Nigeria, stay there for a week, and try to teach the farmers how to be members, like in Denmark, how to show them how we did in Denmark. So it's a way to help this cooperative to establish themselves in Nigeria, trying to tell the farmers, well, if you want to be a member, you have some benefits, but you must also trust each other. You should not have corruption. So simply try to tell them what we did in Denmark, and try to tell them it may also be useful for you in Africa.
El profesor nos habla que, por ejemplo, agri-food quiere generar un clúster de industrias lácteas en Nigeria, particularmente en una aldea de aproximadamente 1,000 granjeros, una gran cantidad, y entonces lo invitaron a ir a Nigeria para que les explicara qué significa ser miembro de una cooperativa bajo un esquema de cómo funcionan las cooperativas en Dinamarca. Entonces el profesor les explicó cuáles son los beneficios, el hecho que debe haber confianza y que debe haber poca corrupción.
One more example, if you don't mind. Yeah, we have been asked by the food companies, please help us to benchmark, to measure the animal welfare in our cattle production. Try to compare our level of animal welfare in Denmark, Sweden, Germany, UK, and France. So it may help us to see, well, are there any weak links? Where are we strong, maybe weak? Should we give cattle more access to land, or simply try to benchmark, to compare the animal welfare with around more than 100 factors about animal welfare. So try to make a benchmark and to present a report for the companies.
Otro ejemplo fue, se le solicitó al profesor hacer un análisis de comparar el bienestar animal, por ejemplo, de Dinamarca y otros países de la Unión Europea, como Francia, como Reino Unido. Entonces, comenta el profesor de manera resumida que encontró hasta 100 variables que justamente afectan al bienestar animal. Y bueno, los productores justamente querían saber si necesitaba que el ganado estuviese, por ejemplo, en campos más grandes, con mayor espacio, para que hubiese un mayor bienestar animal. Así que ese es otro apoyo que ellos como científicos le brindan a las cooperativas. So, thank you very much, Henning. We have a lot more questions. We had a lot of people connected. Now it's time for our conclusions, and we hope to see you soon in another events. And thank you very much again for your participation. So thank you. And now I will.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you.
Pues muchas gracias al profesor Henning. El tiempo se nos agota. Y bueno, ahora es tiempo de dar paso a las conclusiones. Esperamos verlo pronto en otros eventos. Esperamos también que esta presentación haya sido de su agrado y que nos dé perspectivas justamente de a qué hacer en el colegio, ya que vienen leyes muy importantes relacionadas con la sustentabilidad, como la ley de trazabilidad y de economía circular. Doctor Ponciano, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, doctora Alejandra, doctor Henning. Muchas gracias por su excelente ponencia e intercambio de ideas. Realmente es un tema muy actual. Y también, bueno, porque en México, digamos, en casi todas las cadenas agroalimentarias hay una gran oportunidad que es trabajar la asociatividad, y una de ellas es las cooperativas. Fue interesante para mí saber que, pues, Dinamarca en 1980 tenía un detalle, como ustedes dicen, producía materias primas, ¿no? Producía granos. Y bueno, pero para ser más competitivos, pues decidieron crear ganado, cerdo, aves, para pues aumentar la competitividad y ser más fuertes, ¿no? Y cómo, pues a través del tiempo, ahora con los resultados que nos muestra, pues se observa cómo se han disminuido los costos, se ha mejorado la eficiencia a través de mejoramiento genético. En el caso de los cerdos, nos hablaba de que cómo pasaron de 12 a 35 lechones por hembra por año, lo cual es un cambio pues muy notable, ¿no? Que mejora la eficiencia. Y también, bueno, eso pues es producto, digamos, de lo que nos deja los beneficios de la organización, ¿no? En cooperativas o en otras formas de asociación. Y uno de ellos es mejorar la educación, mejorar las habilidades, destrezas, competencias de los propios productores, ¿no? Y algo que también me llama mucho la atención y que ojalá usted acepte que ser un mentor de nosotros, porque habla de que, pues, dentro de estos cambios que se dieron, pues la idea habla de los mentores, ¿no? Y bueno, dicen que un mentor es una persona que ya hizo lo que nosotros queremos hacer. Así es que lo que ustedes han hecho en Dinamarca y en otros países en Europa, pues es algo que, digamos, nos inspira, y que ojalá y podamos contar con su apoyo para pues aprender de ustedes y en su momento dar esa transición, ¿no? De cómo ustedes lo hicieron en diferentes cadenas aquí en México. Lo otro que me llamó mucho la atención es cuando usted dice que, pues, la idea es servir a la comunidad, ¿no? Eso, digamos, es un espíritu de servicio. Y el espíritu de servicio, pues creo que, como nos lo comentó, va de todos los actores que intervienen en los eslabones de las cadenas. También, bueno, ya nos dio varios ejemplos de varios países donde las cooperativas están muy bien, y que gracias a ello, pues, están en donde están, ¿no? Con su eficiencia y productividad. Cuando nos habla de por qué los productores se organizan, y esto es algo bien interesante, es porque usted comenta, obtienen ganancias, ¿no? Obtienen utilidades y otros beneficios. El integrarse permite participar en una cadena de valor fuerte. Pero no es lo mismo estar negociando o haciendo gestiones de manera, digamos, solos, que en cooperativa, ¿no? Entonces eso da una gran fortaleza. Y lo otro es el trabajo en conjunto. Y dentro de eso del trabajo en conjunto, pues implica que, dicen por ahí, cooperan, colaboran, se asocian y en su momento, pues sí hay competitividad, pero no nada más es solo competir por competir. También nos llamó mucho la atención cuando usted analizó los factores que, digamos, pues han permitido que las cooperativas, digamos, tengan éxito, ¿no? O haya una gran cantidad. Y usted dice que la edad no es importante. En otros países a veces decimos, no, pues ya la edad ya es 55 años, 60, y por lo tanto, pues ya a veces algunos ya no podemos aprender o ya creemos que ya prácticamente nos vamos a jubilar, ¿no? Pero bueno, usted nos indica que no, ¿no? En Dinamarca la edad promedio es de 55 años, nos comenta, y aún así, digamos, con esa edad, pues están bien organizados y están, pues, con ese éxito que nos acaba de mostrar. Lo otro, pues los impuestos, que a veces nosotros también decimos, no, pues ¿será que tienen bajos impuestos? Nos dice que no, los impuestos son altos. La cuestión de la reglamentación ambiental o la normatividad, pues tampoco es fácil. Al contrario, nos comentaba ayer que son altos, pero gracias a eso, pues a los productores y a los actores les permite, pues, digamos, concentrarse y hacer muy bien su trabajo, ¿verdad? Y gracias a eso, bueno, pues logran, pues, digamos, disminuir estos factores que a veces nosotros vemos como limitantes, ¿no? Gracias a la cooperación, pues tienen la integración vertical, lo que nos dice que les ha permitido conectar los eslabones desde el productor al consumidor, disminuir intermediarios y facilitar el transporte del producto al consumidor. Digamos, lograr estas que acabo de comentar, pues realmente permite que los integrantes de una cadena o de una cooperativa, perdón, tengan éxito, tengan beneficios y utilidades. También cuando nos comentó acerca de las autoridades y la gente, llama la atención que usted comenta, dice que colaboran. O sea, no es nada más controlar, sino es controlar y enseñar. O sea, hay ambas funciones, ¿no? En su momento, cuando hay que normar, hay que controlar, controlamos, pero también enseñamos, y gracias a eso, pues los productores cada vez son más buenos, y también los procesadores y los diferentes actores de una cadena. El estar organizados en clúster les permite también tener una economía de escala, que esto, que ustedes puedan responder a los mercados, a las demandas de forma rápida y en tiempo. Eso también es algo muy notable, porque a veces, bueno, está la demanda. Aquí en Veracruz creo que acaban de decir, bueno, necesitamos tantas toneladas de hortalizas. Sí, pero ¿quién me lo abastece? Entonces, en tiempo y forma. Entonces, el estar organizados en cooperativas, pues les permite todos estos beneficios. Lo otro es la habilidad de llevar la investigación y el desarrollo del laboratorio al campo muy rápidamente. O sea, al estar, digamos, conectados, los diferentes actores, pues se detectan esas necesidades y se solucionan para beneficio de los actores. Lo otro que también ayer nos comentaba y hoy igual es que la asesoría de expertos está impulsada por los propios productores, y esos productores pues piden resultados, ¿no? Y nos comentaba ayer, sí, se les paga a los asesores, y se les paga bien, pero con base a resultados. Entonces, eso es otra característica que es muy interesante resaltar. Y en cuanto al capital social, el ganar, que tienen el mismo objetivo, trabajan juntos, son colegas, no competidores, es algo bien interesante. Hay confianza en la mesa directiva y entre ellos, ¿verdad? Y hay un beneficio que regresa a los productores. Eso es algo bien interesante. O sea, los productores obtienen beneficios del procesamiento, de los otros eslabones, ¿no? El agregar valor les trae beneficios a los productores. Y pues el éxito de las cooperativas de Dinamarca, pues nos lo dice esta canadiense, ¿verdad? Que dice que cuando le hacen la pregunta que cuál es la diferencia que hace a las cooperativas en Dinamarca exitosas, pues dice, uno es la forma como se organizan. Dos, la cadena de valor es eficiente, sin intermediarios. Hay facilidad de llevar información del mercado a los productores. O sea, los productores saben qué está demandando el mercado. Son exitosos y los productores son los propietarios, o sea, de la cooperativa. También los productores confían en otros productores y en la comunidad. Esto es algo que un valor que se llama confianza, o sea, confianza entre sí mismos y en la mesa directiva, ¿no? Y también lo otro es acceso a los mercados. Los productores son expertos, fíjense. O sea, al ser ellos, digamos, concentrados y enfocados en producir, al ser comprometidos y competitivos, digamos, no se distraen en andar buscando clientes, sino las cooperativas son los que hacen esa función desde el procesamiento hasta, digamos, la comercialización, es parte de la función de las cooperativas y por lo tanto los productores tienen que enfocarse a producir. Eso también es algo que es necesario resaltar. ¿Qué otros beneficios tienen? Bueno, que hay clientes, hay demanda. Nuevamente decíamos que hay menos intermediarios, lo que facilita la trazabilidad, que es algo que nos piden a veces en los mercados para comercializar al exterior. Y la integración vertical, pues permite, digamos, que el mercado y procesamiento lo hagan, ya comentábamos, las cooperativas. En resumen, ya un resumen del resumen, dicen los beneficios es que los productores tienen acceso al mercado, o sea, les da seguridad. Saben lo que el mercado demanda, que es el saber, o sea, qué producir. Lo otro, están seguros de vender, igual lo que les da confianza y seguridad. Entonces, y las ventajas, pues para que obtienen es, pues, tienen gran integración, bajos costos de transacción, no hay intermediarios, los productos van directamente del productor al consumidor, siempre hay un cliente, hay baja demanda de capital, o sea, los bancos tienen confianza también en dar créditos a las cooperativas y por lo tanto hay recursos para producir y eso pues es lo que finalmente causa o como producto es que las cooperativas en Dinamarca sean robustas y casi nunca quiebren. Eso es algo muy, muy importante que, bueno, los productores obviamente les da seguridad y gracias a ello, pues, hacer cada quien lo que tiene que hacer. Así es que, doctor, muchas gracias por compartirnos sus experiencias en Dinamarca y como lo comentamos, nos encantaría que sea nuestro mentor. Gracias. Muchas gracias.
So, Henning, thank you. Thank you very much. We are very interested if you can be our mentor. This is the word of Dr. Ponciano. I know that you're very open to collaborate. In Colegio de Postgraduados, we are part of the Ministry of Agriculture. So we have these models in which we work with poor communities and we can apply models in these poor communities and enhance their life level. So we are interested always in how we can, through research and patents, enhance the level of the farmers. So Dr. Ponciano talked about all what you said. He made a very good summary of what makes the Danish cooperative so successful. And I would like to ask you, because I know it's late in Denmark, if you want to say something final to us, do you think that Mexico can be successful in having more sustainable organizations?
I think you have very good options for that. Compared to Denmark, we are a very small country, very intensive, very high yields, and this will make a pressure on being sustainable because we have very little land, very intensive farming, many animals per hectare. So that is really for us a huge challenge or problem. I guess you have much more space in Mexico, available land, less environmental pressure. So I guess perhaps you have more better options than we have in Denmark in the future to be more sustainable. We have also greenhouses with a huge energy demand. You have much better climate in Mexico. So I guess both the land and the climate give you a better position for being perhaps even more sustainable than we are in Denmark.
Y finalmente le preguntamos al profesor si cree que México pueda llegar a ser sustentable y nos dice que sí. En Dinamarca ellos sufren por la cantidad de tierra que existen. Finalmente es un país pequeño. México tiene más tierra y tiene un clima que es mucho más favorable. Así que, ¿por qué no México puede llegar a ser sustentable en un futuro? So thank you, Henning, very much. And I hope to see you soon and continue collaborating.
Yeah, let's keep in touch. That's fine. Thank you.
For sure.
So
Good
bye.
night,
Have a nice
Denmark.
day. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. See you.